Not all corruption arrives screaming. Some of it agrees with you first, and by the time you recognize it, it is already part of you. It does not break the mind, it completes it. The warp does not impose itself upon reality, it reflects it. And when that reflection becomes more stable than the original, it is no longer a reflection, it is the truth that remains. The warp is not an intruder. It does not arrive. It is already present, is the unseen dimension of thought and emotion. Every act of fear, belief, ambition leaves an imprint, not metaphorically, literally. These imprints do not fade. They accumulate, they interact, and over time they begin to reflect back, not as memory, but as structure. Corruption begins at the moment that reflection is recognized, not as foreign, but as familiar. That recognition is not rejection, it is alignment, a thought that resolves tension, an idea that simplifies complexity, a feeling that sustains itself without effort. Nothing is taken, something is gained. Clarity, direction, relief. And because it works, it is repeated. What repeats stabilizes. What stabilizes begins to replace. At no point does this feel like loss, because nothing appears to be removed, only refined. As repetition continues, patterns emerge, not imposed, selected. Certain emotional configurations prove more stable than others, more efficient, more persistent. Over time, these patterns concentrate, and where they concentrate, they take form. The entities known as the Chaos Gods are not creators of this process. They are its result. Rage, despair, ambition, excess. Given enough repetition, become structure. And once structured, they begin to shape what enters them. At this stage, the rules begin to change, not abruptly, but completely. The warp does not organize itself around matter. It organizes around meaning. Emotion has location. Memory has distance. Desire has direction. To navigate it is not to measure space, but to interpret it. Instruments fail because they search for constraints. Perception succeeds because it adapts. What appears unstable is only unstable to those expecting reality to behave differently. This is why the mind becomes central, not because it is weak, but because it is compatible. To think is to interact. Psychers do so directly, but no mind is separate from this system. Every thought produces signal. Every signal leaves trace. Most are too weak to matter, but none are absent. The difference is not immunity, only magnitude. There is something older than words, than identity. It flows under the collective subconsciousness that guides us all. The archetypes beyond time's eras, the feeling that even primitive man felt, and the raw expression of desire, they bind us, and through them we know the warp, and the warp knows us. Despite the ancient influence, at this stage, awareness remains, not complete, but sufficient to observe change. There is no identifiable point of intrusion, no boundary crossed, no external agent detected. Thought continues, uninterrupted, consistent, and because it continues, it is accepted. The emerging pattern does not present as foreign. It presents as alignment. We do not register it as alteration, only clarification. The dominant impulse strengthens, not as pressure, but as coherence. Contradictions resolve. Not through decision, but through absence. Alternate perspectives do not collapse, they fail to return. Doubt does not resist, it diminishes. What remains is easier to think of as the system simplifying without indicating loss. We can still recall prior states, but they no longer stabilize. By comparison, the Imperium sustains itself through limitation, through suppression, through fear. These methods preserve instability, but they prevent resolution. They delay coherence. The Eldari attempt avoidance, containment, fragmentation of experience. This introduces inefficiency. It preserves contradiction. It prevents completion. Both systems prioritize persistence over the unity of convergence. We continue thinking, acting, existing, without interruption, without contradiction, without requirement for correction. The transformation completes without being observed by the system undergoing it. Once interaction begins, it does not remain neutral. Thought influences the warp, and the warp returns that influence. Stronger, more defined, more usable. This is the moment corruption becomes self-sustaining, because the subject is no longer reacting. It is participating, and participation produces reinforcement. What is reinforced feels correct. The warp's influence is not a violation of the will. Not at first. Once it becomes part of you, it feels truly natural. According to records, anyways. In this study, can you not see its risks? It's not worth it, my good aspirant. It is not about the question of return to any sense of normalcy. It is about studying the profane, and then no longer being compatible with normal. Is it any surprise that sanctioned psychers, navigators, and astropaths are so strange? This does not remain contained. Individuals do not exist in isolation. They build structures, share beliefs, repeat behaviors, and those patterns scale. What stabilizes in a mind stabilizes in a group. What stabilizes among groups stabilizes in star systems. At this point, corruption is no longer an event. It is infrastructure. The Inquisition exists to manage this reality, not to eliminate it. Because elimination is not possible. One may as well try to drown in the sea of souls with the flames of ambition. There is only limitation, only control of spread. A worthy, ambitious project, and, of course, such things feed Zinch. Some attempt avoidance, others use. Controlled exposure, directed application. Structures such as the Grey Knights or the Exorcists reflect this approach. To confront corruption by enduring proximity to it. But proximity does not diminish risk. It concentrates it. At sufficient exposure, a conclusion emerges that the system is understood, that interaction can be managed, that power can be directed. And in a limited sense, this is true. Alignment produces results, but those results are not ownership. They are participation. The system does not resist control. It incorporates it, and in doing so, removes the boundary between user and subject. For knowledge of the warp spreads its tendrils. Foreknowledge of chaos spreads that essence. Knowledge is not the tool humanity often assumes it to be. At no stage is corruption forced, not always. At no stage is it required. Every step functions, every step produces results. Every step reinforces itself until reversal is no longer meaningful, because there is no original state to return to, only the stable form that remains. In the warp, nothing is given, nothing is taken. It is only made consistent. It is our myth and mechanism, and once made consistent, it does not return.